My mom got an email yesterday. It had come from Phila SD Portal about the digital academy. I think they're doing it. I think it's an option for like every student because it was sent through the Phila SD.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen.
My mom got an email yesterday. It had come from.
We're live on YouTube, just so everybody knows.
Hey.
Hi, Kayla.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you for waiting. We're going to start in just a second. We just want to make sure everybody has a chance to get here before we start. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for waiting. We're really excited to have you here. So first, I'm just going to give a brief overview of what the night is going to look like so you know what to expect. So no worries if you missed last week's information session or if you just kind of want a refresher. We're going to start with a brief review of what we talked about last week and make sure that everybody is on the same page before we go into our topic for this week. So today we're going to go in a little bit more in depth than we did last week. We're looking at really what a pilot's donation would look like in Philadelphia, meaning how large would it be and what would this look like within our schools in ways that are easier to understand than just a big dollar sign, basically. And throughout the night, we're going to be taking some actions together, some virtual actions to broadcast our demands together during this presentation. And of course, like last week, we're really excited to host a panel of Philly students and Penn faculty. They're extraordinary and they have some great stories to share, and I'm really excited to see that later. But first, let's get everybody up to speed. So we all know that Philly schools are critically underfunded. We see it in every single aspect of our school lives. Like our panelists shared last week, we see it in a lack of counselors and nurses, and in our school lunches, and in the lack of arts. And even when we don't see it, like the asbestos and the lead within our schools, it's there. And it's beginning to threaten our education and the health of our students and our school community members. But why are we so critically underfunded? Well, when we look at how the district is funded, it's almost as much coming from local contributions as it is coming from state contributions, which might not seem like a crazy thing, but it is. Pennsylvania doesn't have a fair funding formula. So basically, poor districts like Philadelphia are getting pretty much the same cut as everybody else, including districts that are on the complete other side of the spectrum, like Lower Merion. And that's why Philly has so much less to spend per student, because our local revenue is just spread too thin. And looking at what we do have and where that's coming from, local revenue contributions are overwhelmingly coming from real estate tax. And that's what we're getting at here. We see that property taxes are so integral to the funding of our district and the schools within it, but a huge portion of it, almost $30 billion, is tax exempt. But why? Well, mega nonprofits. These are massive organizations that employ many people, have huge annual budgets. We're talking over $500 million a year. And maybe you guessed it, they own huge amounts of land. But despite bringing in huge amounts of revenue and having billion-dollar endowments and spending billions on research, these nonprofits are subject to the same exemptions and privileges as the tiny nonprofits in the city. And when we talk about mega nonprofits, some of the largest property owners and these mega nonprofits that we're talking about are our universities, like Penn, Drexel, Jefferson, and more of the like. And something really needs to change about that. These institutions are contributing to inequity in Philly schools because they're turning a blind eye and saying that they do enough with small civic contributions. They talk about sewage contributions and private police forces, while they paste these pretty pictures of Philadelphia across their brochures and websites. These institutions are profiting off of Philadelphia and its people and the students within it, and are taking up huge amounts of land, but they're giving nothing back. And so we're asking them to start changing that. Instead of just taking and taking, to start giving back and contributing to the Philadelphia community. And that starts with pilots. And maybe you've heard us use that term a lot and weren't really sure what it meant. It has nothing to do with planes or anything like that. Pilots are payments in lieu of taxes. And these are voluntary donations made by tax-exempt nonprofits as a substitute for property taxes. And it's not like this fight started last week or even this year or any time close to where we are now. This has been going on for a really long time. And in the 90s, we did have a pilots program. Mayor Rendell agreement with these institutions, nearly 50 of these mega nonprofits were contributing pilots. But after a few years, that fizzled out. And now there's basically no pilot revenue coming into the city. And now we're asking Mayor Kenny to take on the role that Mayor Rendell did in the 90s and to do that work and to push for a pilots program. And we're asking him for a specific reason. He told us he would do this. In 2016, Mayor Kenny ran on a platform that included supporting and fighting for a pilot program. And it makes sense because Kenny, he claims to be a champion of public schools, and fighting for pilots is part of how we improve public education in Philadelphia. And I hope that he is that champion. But until he takes action, we can't see it because these pilots have such a huge potential to increase funding for Philly schools. We can't ignore this and we can't brush down the table. We have to take action. And when we do win this fight, we're not ready to just watch this money go somewhere where we can't see. We want to see it go into our schools. We don't want to see it go somewhere where we can't feel it, where students can't feel it, like the pockets or the offices of high up administrators. And that's why we're demanding that he establish the Education Equity Fund, a term coined by Jobs with Justice. And this fund, it would be funded by pilots and allocated by city council because we need transparency. This money needs to go into our classrooms and our buildings and our cafeterias. And Mayor Kenny is not the only one in this situation that's an outlier who's facing a precedent that they're not following up to. These universities are also disregarding a precedent. 6 out of the 7 other Ivy Leagues are paying pilots their communities while also contributing civically. So when these institutions say that they're doing enough, no, you're not doing enough. And the private police force and the contribution to sewage and the development of West Philly and University City, no, it's not enough. So now we're going to get into the thick of it a little bit. What are we asking for? What would this look like? So there was a really big number earlier, almost $30 billion, the value of the tax-exempt property in Philadelphia. But not all of that land is owned by mega nonprofits. Some of it is owned by the city or smaller public institutions. And even the value that these institutions would be, that would be in their property tax, we're not asking for 100% of it. Most of these campaigns are lobbying for 40% of the expected property tax of these giant mega nonprofits on the land they own. And this lovely graphic breaks it down a little bit more. We can see these really big names like Penn and Drexel and Jefferson and St. Joseph's and LaSalle, institutions that collectively own billions of dollars of property in Philadelphia, but continue to pay not a dime in taxes on it. And so when we're looking what a pilot's program would actually physically look like in Philadelphia, we're looking at a number that's at least $40 million. That's the potential for increase in funding that we're looking at for the Philadelphia School District. But $40 million is a really big amount, and it's really hard to quantify. I know that it's hard for me to understand the significance of millions and especially billions, but there are things that we understand, the problems we see in our schools and how this money could physically fit into that. And Malcolm is going to go a little bit more into what $40 million would look like in our district.
So, I mean, it's no secret that Philadelphia public schools are underfunded. But like Lola said, $40 million in annual increase in budget is a hard number to comprehend. So for our schools, we currently employ about 321 counselors, which leads us to an average with a student body of 203,000 students. It's a ratio of about 1 to 627 students, counselors to students. The recommendation is 1 to 250 students. The total cost in salaries and benefits for all those counselors was $40.9 million. And with the extra $40 million that pilots would provide, we could hire 317 additional counselors, almost doubling the amount we already have, which would lower the ratio to a much more, still not recommended, but a better rate of one counselor to 318 students. In the Philadelphia Public School budget, there's also a section marked discretionary funds. And so this usually covers things from textbooks to computers and extracurricular activities. In 2019 to 20 school year, it was about $140 to $165 a student. Now that's just a little bit more than one textbook might cost. This is with another $40 million, the district could over double this, spending almost $200 more per student, which in a time when we now know that every student needs a Chromebook, and because of the COVID situation, it should be a high priority thing. Another way you could visualize this is with art programs. This could fund about 800 designated art programs, which would be about 4 in every school. Then there's other ways we could visualize this too. We know that there's going to be an increase in spending this year because of the coronavirus. That is kind of a smaller estimation in the grand scheme of things, but maybe that could also go to making our schools a non-toxic place to be. So yeah, these are a couple of the ways how we can visualize that sum of money. We do know that institutions like Penn claim that they do community services, or as we call it, services in lieu of taxes. One of these is recent. It's the Penn RSSA Academy. This is summer classes that are helping, I think, over 14,000 seniors apply to college. And this is an undeniably valuable resource. But it is not a $40 million resource. This is not nearly equal to the amount of money that the school district could get from these payments. Another one is Penn Alexander. This is an elementary school in the University City, which gets an additional $700,000 from Penn. Now, this is controversial for a couple reasons, one of which is the Penn Alexander effect, which is rising property values in the University City district, which pushes out residents who have been living there for a long time. This is better covered in an article called The Penn Alexander Effect that was published in the Inquirer in 2018. But also the $700,000 a year that Penn pays to Penn Alexander is a fraction of the $40 million that the school district could be getting. So while these services are incredibly valuable to the people who use them, they are not nearly the amount that Penn and other institutions could be contributing to all students across the city. So before we go any further, I want to ask everybody watching to do a little 5-minute call to action. So please go comment on Mayor Kenny's Instagram. We need him to set up an education equity fund so that when we do get this money, it can be allocated in a fair and transparent way. And So just a quick reminder of what we're doing right now. We're asking everybody watching right now to do a little 5-minute action. Please go to Mayor Kenny's Instagram and ask him in the comment section to um, fund this or start this education equity fund, so we can assure that um, when and if mega nonprofits do pay pilots, we can allocate this money to public schools in a fair and transparent way. And also feel free to email Mayor Kenny. There's a template can be found on the screen through the Linktree link, and it's very easy, and it's something that you can do right now to help us fight for our pilots. All right. I guess we should continue. All right. So now we are going to have our panel. This is Philly students and Penn faculty. So we have Nate from SLA at Bieber, Anaja from Ben Franklin, Kayla from Frankfurt, and Professor Gerald Campagno from the Penn Graduate School of Education. So the first question is, how does your experience as a student in the Philadelphia School District or as an educator inform your decision to fight for pilots? And we will start with Nate.
Okay. Hello, everyone. As I was previously introduced, my name is Nate Medina, and I'm a senior at SLA Bieber. So let me just pull this up. Okay. So I want to talk about how pilots could help improve conditions within my school and within other schools. Lack of air conditioning throughout the whole school is a large problem within my school. I remember my school and many others having a lot of half days for the first month of the 2018 to 2019 school year because it was too hot in the school. Since then, we've gotten more air conditioners, but not every room has one. So some teachers and students still have to deal with working in a hot classroom. And many students find it hard to work in a hot classroom because it's going to be uncomfortable. The bathrooms are another problem. A lot of the stalls don't close, and only a few of the sinks tend to work. And another big problem within the bathrooms is that the floors are wet. The water is likely from the toilets, which is extremely dangerous, not only because a student could slip, but it's also very unsanitary. Lunches are another big issue. There have been times where sometimes the cafeteria will run out of the main lunch. Lunch is vital. It's been proven that those who eat lunch focus better in class and get better grades. I recall a time where cafeteria workers had to make sandwiches because they ran out of the lunch that was being served that day. In terms of every day, the farther back in the line you are, the less food you're likely to get. People at the front of the line might get chicken tenders, fries, or rolling corn, and people near the end might just end up with the chicken and the corn. Let me see. I recall my friends getting chicken sandwiches with chicken patties that they could barely bite through because they were that hard. Sometimes the food has no flavor at all. There also needs to be more options and information for those with allergies. A friend of mine has celiac disease. Celiac disease is an allergy to gluten. Even the smallest amount can trigger it, and when it's triggered, it could cause awful symptoms like abdominal pain and nausea. My friend often can't get a full lunch because most of the foods are either contaminated with gluten or they have gluten. A lot of the times information on whether there was a possibility that there was contaminations of the food, like this food was made with like products that have wheat in it, it wasn't available information. All the students should have access to balanced lunch at school. According to the notebook, 81% of students who attend a Philadelphia public school live in poverty. These students depend on school for a healthy breakfast and lunch. Obesity and poverty have been proven to be linked. Increased funding for breakfast and lunch so meals are filling and healthy could really help that out. The last issue that I can think of that is that we occasionally see a mouse running around the classroom. For us, it's not too big of a problem, but it's still unsanitary and needs to be fixed. With more funding, we could fix all these problems and our school days will be much better. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you for that, Nate. Anasha, please speak to how does your experience as a student in the Philadelphia School District inform your decision?
My experience as a Philadelphia School District student informs my opinion on the pilot program because so I am a senior at Benjamin Franklin High School. I went to several high schools, so I have a broad range from the actual Philadelphia School District online school to even Mastery Charter itself. And it seems to be that the consistent problem throughout all of the schools is funding, of course. And I feel like the funding can change a lot of things like as school lunches because like previously was said, a lot of the school lunches are unhealthy. Me personally, I never eat the school lunch because the sanitation problems, like a lot of things aren't clean. A lot of the actual people that prepare the lunches don't even know what is in the lunch. So I can say like, hey, I'm a vegan. Can you tell me like some vegan options? They don't have that option, a vegetarian option, anything like maybe you don't eat dairy, but this is made with cheese. They couldn't even tell you if the product was made with cheese, or even just from some of the lunches being spoiled. Like they'll have milk that was delivered earlier the day sitting on the step in the hot sun, and then they'll serve it to the kids, and it's all slimy, goopy, and we're just supposed to eat it. And it's supposed to be okay. A lot of children have gotten sick off of eating the school lunches because they can have an allergy and the cafeteria women won't know what's actually in the food. Like I have a orange allergy. I had ate a slice of pizza once and they were like, oh yeah, that's like the sauce was made with orange zest. I had an allergic reaction. They didn't know that. They had to call in, like literally call the people that they got the pizzas from just for them to tell them what they had, which is really unsafe because if you're serving it and you can't explain to me what's in it, someone could potentially, die from that problem. Even with just sanitation as a big thing. In Beige Martin Elementary School, for example, we had a leakage. Like the rain was coming through, the basement was flooded, and the basement is where our cafeteria is, which is also unsanitary because it's a basement. The pipes burst from the bathroom, which was like leaking out bathroom water and whatnot, and it's right near where we have to eat at. So we're sitting in whatever kind of water is coming from the bathroom, and we have to eat in those situations and things like that. Roaches in the classrooms, mice, ants. Even in Benjamin Franklin, we had a huge asbestos problem, which was not addressed well. We had to transfer schools. Part of the school was online until they can get a building for us to be in, and then we had to be in that building for half of the year. And then once the problem was fixed, so to say, they sent us back to the new building. But a lot of things are still there that were there previously, like auditoriums and things like that. They didn't deconstruct the building and break it down and really clean, but more so cleaned it minimally so that it's a small amount of asbestos that can't necessarily harm you. A lot of these schools that were built, you know, in the 1900s or even 1800s that are still standing probably all have asbestos. But, you know, Benjamin Franklin, since it was a problem with it, that's the only one that they clean. But they're not, you know, shutting down all of the schools that could potentially have it that were built in a later century, that they could have shut those down and, you know, prevented the asbestos problem, but that cost millions and thousands, and it's not a priority on the list. Even school supplies and textbooks, like we have old textbooks, no covers, ripped out pages. There's not even enough that maybe 2 to 3 students have to use one textbook because the school can't afford to provide new ones or to provide enough to even fill up a classroom. Even like with computers and things, with this new corona thing coming out, the school is providing computers, but there's a limited supply. I'm pretty sure there's not enough computers for everyone. Even internet access, if we're required to stay home, a lot of these children are living in poverty, and with the school lunches going into that as well, you know, some of those kids won't be able to eat going in home, so they're just going to give, you know, an apple and a yogurt and that's a breakfast. Whereas if we had the funding, we could give children a full breakfast that can actually feed them, and, you know, a full lunch that's actually fulfilling. Like a slice of pizza is really not healthy for a lunch. Manufactured tater tots is not real food. You know what I mean? Like an actual sandwich, an apple, and a bottle of water. They don't provide water whatsoever in our school. We do have water fountains, but some of them are old and broken. So if your school is lucky enough to have new water fountains, then of course you're lucky enough to have those. Whereas some schools are not at all. Like we have broken water fountains or water fountain with horrible water coming out of it, and we're supposed to just live like that and drink that, where you can be getting sick, lead poisoning, any of those things. Even with school nurses, there is a shortage. My school specifically, we have a nurse. She's only there 2 days out of the week, and most of the time she's on a lunch break, so we might have her for an hour. So if you get hurt on Monday, like severely hurt, the nurse is not there, so there's nothing they can really do, but you might call a hospital or whatnot. But that's unsafe, because in that time that it took you to call the hospital or go get the principal, I could be dead or like bleeding out, and there's nothing they really do about it. Even with the school nurse, they don't provide that much care. They might give you a pack of ice and a Band-Aid, but that's not going to help you. You still have to then go to a hospital. Like there's no kind of, you know, real concern about the things that are going on. Like counselors, we have counselors, but they're only there if you go to them. They're not checking in on you consistently, like, hey, how's your week going? How is the schoolwork? Do you need any help? They don't have any programs. They don't have any thoughts of like, okay, well, I know this student is failing in this class, so maybe I'll set up a tutoring session with her. Or I know we have to be at home for the next 6 months, so are we going to have some Zoom calls with the counselor to say like, how is your being at home? How is your mental state, and on how everything is going? Do you have efficient stuff to stay at home for these however many months that they want us to? And the main thing that I'm really concerned about is the No Child Left Behind rule. I feel like it was made and forgotten because a lot of kids are neglected in education. Like me, for instance, I went to homeschool, the Philadelphia School District's homeschool. I suck at homeschool, but now I'm being force fed homeschool, where I could potentially fail and not even be able to graduate because they're not giving you enough stability or, you know, helping you too much in homeschool. They just send you an assignment and expect you to do it, not checking up like, hey, do you need help? Are you getting it done? Is there anything we can do to make the experience better for you? Nothing. So I feel like some kids are being passed along. Some kids are just getting grades that they didn't really work for, whereas kids that worked for it might get a lower grade than expected. Some of the teachers I feel like aren't properly trained in things. Maybe there should be more teachers in the classroom to help kids, because there could be 15 kids playing around in the classroom and you have a group of 5 kids that are actually trying to learn. The teacher will literally stop teaching to tend to the kids that are acting, you know, irate in the classroom and whatnot. And now we have to sit here and miss out on our education. Some kids come to school to learn, some kids come to school to play, but it's not fair that we can't learn because some kids don't want to. So maybe if there was more than one teacher in a classroom, assistant teacher or whatnot, that person could handle that, but the education doesn't stop. I like to say, you know, one monkey doesn't stop a show, but sadly in the school district, that is how it works. One kid can just stop the whole classroom, and that's sad because it's supposed to be no kid left behind, but we're getting left behind, or we're falling back, or we're not able to get the education that's promised to us. So I just feel like this pilot program would be very great because it can bring in a lot of funding to change these things, and it can bring in more people, bring in experts, start more training, get the children the education that you're promising them. Although it's free, people that pay for it get a great education. So why should the free program just be so minimal and limited when you can bring in the funding to help us actually get somewhere in life and not just give us the simplest things?
Wow, thank you. So now we're going to hear from Kayla from Frankfurt. How does your experience as a student in the school district inform your decision to fight for pilots?
Hi. So my experiences in the school district really haven't been that well. A $40 million could really take us very, very far, such as, for one, the schools could become cleaner. So in all the schools I've been to, I have seen so many rodents, such as mice and roaches, and it has even come to the point where we have started naming them, which I know that sounds crazy, but we have literally started naming our mice. So another way the schools can become cleaner is the bathroom. As Nate has previously mentioned, the bathrooms, the toilets be clogged, there be water all over the floor, there be writing on the walls, the sinks, half of them don't even work. And like the basement of the school, it be so dirty, and a lot of kids have music down there. So that's another way it could like help. Also with damage and less school supplies or classroom supplies, so many of my teachers have had to come out of their pockets and like replace the classroom supplies, or they spend their whole summer trying to fix the classroom desks. They be trying to repaint the walls because it be filling so much, and they be having to come out of their pocket to pay for tissues and hand sanitizers. And I personally feel as though that is stuff that should be supplied by the school, and might be just my opinion, but that's how I feel. And the arts, there are not really art programs in the school because of the little bit of funding. Me personally, arts have taken me so far in life. Like it's helped me a lot. And without them, I don't know. I don't know what I would do. And there is sad to say that in all of the schools I've been, that there has been very, very, very little arts, like musicals, choir, band. So it could go towards that. As Nate has also said, it could help with the school lunch because they are not very healthy. The vending machines are not very healthy, it's not very sanitized. So yeah, I had wrote so much more, but that is the basics.
Thank you so much. That was really great again. And now for Dr. Campano. How has your experience as an educator informed your decision to fight for pilots?
First of all, I just want to thank you so much for inviting me. It's just a tremendous honor to be on a panel with such brilliant colleagues. And anything I say is really going to pale in comparison to Anaja, Nate, and Kayla. And you all know firsthand, your testimonials are extremely powerful and I think compelling. And I just want to thank everyone who's tuning in and the organizers and my colleagues for really taking precious time out of your own personal lives to advocate for this cause. And one of the things, so I'm just going to tell you what this means to me as an individual, as an educator, and also as a member of Penn's community. Just personally, I come from an immigrant family. My father's Filipino, my mother's an immigrant from Europe. Both my parents grew up in abject poverty, and public education was really the vehicle, and I'm not saying it's the only vehicle, but it was really the vehicle in my family and future generations to have more self-determination in life and have more life opportunities and chances. So I'm a strong believer in the public system, but I also am a big critic of the public system, especially in the ways in which it does a disservice to so many of our brilliant young people. I was also a school teacher for 10 years, not in Philadelphia, but I have connections to Philadelphia, but in other very much under-resourced school districts. And my experiences from a teacher's perspective really resonate with the wonderful testimonials you just heard. When I taught 5th grade, I often had 45 to 50 children in my classroom. And I considered myself at the time a very committed and passionate teacher. But it's really hard to teach when you have 45 to 50 children in a small room that's meant for 20 kids without working air conditioning, also with vermin, and so many just fundamentally, structural inequities. Also, I can relate to what a number of you said from my vantage point as a teacher. I think that in the school I taught at, it was an elementary school with 1,200 children. We only had a part-time nurse. We only had a part-time counselor, but there was a full-time police officer, meaning that children often couldn't get the psychological care they need. Let's say if a parent passed away, or if they, broke, an arm on the playground, they might not get the care they need, but they could be arrested 24/7, and no elementary school child should ever, or any school student should be arrested. But in addition to the actual police, one point I want to make is there was a type of policing ideology in the schools, which was used in many ways to justify the schools being underfunded. So instead of small class sizes, instead of a nurturing and creative environment, an intellectually stimulating environment, it was all about testing and drilling and meaningless homework and ranking kids against one another, right, on a type of bell curve. And so a lot of these inequalities, inequities were embedded within the school system. In Philadelphia, I was a teacher for 10 years, working within those conditions. And even as a teacher myself, I experienced all sorts of health issues, stress, my blood pressure was very high. And I wasn't even a student, I was the teacher, right? And what happens when teachers, even well-meaning teachers, even very good teachers, when they're working under these conditions, they get burned out, right? And so they either, research shows that often in a lot of under-resourced contexts, teachers may only last 1 or 2 years, or, and that has a very big impact upon children, because what children need are high quality teachers who are really committed, to their vocation, to their profession, for a lifetime, or at least decades, right? And what instead they're getting rotating teachers coming in and out because they're so burned out from the work, that they're doing. I work, I'm in the School of Education at Penn. I have many students at Penn who are teachers or want to become teachers, and I want them to work in an environment where they feel supported, where they feel like in a context that is not dehumanizing to everyone in the building. And I think you all really articulated just the degree to which how dehumanizing some of the environments are to, you know, teachers, students, and educators alike. But most importantly, to youth and to young people such as yourselves. So I have joined Pilots recently. Penn for Pilots joined the Central Organizing Committee recently. But I am joining it because now I'm a member of Penn's community as a faculty member. And I believe Penn 100% has an ethical responsibility to pay pilots. Penn has been the organization that has perhaps benefited most from the dispossession and gentrification that's gone on in the city, and that has negatively impacted so many of the communities in the city. And because of that, it really has a moral responsibility to give back and, you know, and pay pilots and give back to the public education system. My 5-year-old daughter will be entering the Philadelphia public education system next year. But even if she wasn't, and I'm, you know, I believe just, you know, you shouldn't necessarily have to have skin in the game to realize that this is an ethical and moral responsibility. And I have a lot of incredible colleagues at Penn and many wonderful students. And some of those colleagues are doing genuine work in the city that is beneficial. It's not always beneficial, but often and sometimes it is beneficial. I myself have worked with young people in South Philadelphia to do, for the past 10 years actually, for them to do participatory research. So youth who are part of the Philadelphia School District are doing research on just what you're talking about, the inequities in the system. A lot of young people who are affiliated with the Aquinas Center in South Philly. And I've learned a lot from them, which resonates with what all of you has said. But these individual efforts from faculty, that's not enough, right? These individual outreach programs, you know, they tend to be boutique programs that have the potential to impact in a positive way a couple schools or communities, but paying Penn pilots would be a real gesture, you know, a real commitment, you know, for Penn to see itself not in some ivory tower, right, but to really see itself in solidarity and interconnected with the larger Philadelphia community in a genuine way. And so we also have to really reimagine the relationship between Penn and other universities and the communities. The young people I work with in the Philadelphia School District, the youth and their families, for, you know, they live less than 2 miles away from the university, but before that partnership, they had never even been on campus or invited to campus. So I want to end it by just saying I thank you all of the youth organizers and everyone tuning in right now. The work that you're doing is incredibly important. You are all brilliant leaders and activists, and you are all brilliant intellectuals. I was just, you know, blown away by my colleagues who just presented before I did. And I just am humbled and in gratitude to you. And I want to apologize for myself for not being involved in Penn for Pilots earlier. And I want to apologize on behalf of Penn for not paying pilots to the degree that, you know, my apology counts. And speaking as a member of the Penn community. And again, just reiterate my gratitude for your incredible insights and organizing efforts.
All right. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. And I think we're now fielding questions from the live stream.
I think as of yet, we don't have any questions. So we're going to keep accepting questions if people have them. But for now, we're turning our attention to Penn and Drexel. Another 5 minutes. And we really want to carve out this time in your day for you and hold you accountable. And we're doing it right alongside with you. And if anything, this is more important than commenting and emailing Mayor Kenny. After all, these are voluntary donations that these organizations, these institutions have to make. And we want to make Penn and Drexel and their fellow mega nonprofits feel ashamed and feel the public heat that we hope they're going to get for this. So again, going to their Instagrams or tweeting them. We also have email templates. And if you're unsure of what to comment or just looking for ideas, found on the link tree, there's also an example of comments and other phrases that you can use. We'll see you in 5 minutes. Thank you.
All right, so we have a question from the chat. What future actions can parents or students get involved in to fight for pilots? So everybody should get in contact or at least look into Jobs for Justice, who is an organization here in Philadelphia that is really leading the pilots campaign. We also have a link tree where you can sign up for a newsletter that we are putting out. And that way you can stay in contact with our campaign and we will also probably be giving updates about Jobs for Justice campaigns as well. And yeah, students should absolutely sign up, get in contact with, if you'd like to get involved, you can email the Philadelphia Bullhorn's email at thebullhorn215@gmail.com.
And this is exactly what Malcolm just touched on. So Jobs with Justice. Next week, they're having a week of action that is a combination of virtual events and also direct actions. And the first thing that we want to get people involved in is on Monday, they're having a campaign that's called hashtag share your Dear David Cohen story. And David Cohen is the president of Penn's Board of Trustees. He's one of the people that really can make these decisions and influence change in this situation. Also, to give more context about the board, only two members of Penn's Board of Trustees even live in Philadelphia, and none of them have children that are students in the Philadelphia School District. they are completely removed from these issues. And on Monday, on social media platforms, people are posting their stories and bringing it to their attention. And you can RSVP for that event. There's a link for that on the link tree with Jobs with Justice, or also just express your solidarity and post on Monday. For the rest of the week, the events, some of them are more about Penn alumni and faculty, and so those may not apply to all of us, and those are more personal demands that they're bringing forth the board. But to stay in the loop for things that are going on to culminate the week, they're having some other actions. You can follow Philadelphia Jobs with Justice on Facebook and also on Instagram to stay updated with their work and to be in the loop for that direct action that's coming up. And more information about what Jobs with Justice is, with just for a quick thing, basically they're doing this same kind of work and they've been anchoring this movement for a bunch of other organizations. And you can find out more about them and about this week of action at the link at the top, which is bit.ly/Penn Week of Action. And we're not 100% certain when our involvement with this will be happening, but it will be happening. And so to stay updated with that, like Malcolm said, you can sign up for our newsletter. And if you're directly interested in being a part of these actions, or you have something you want to contribute, there's also a form to fill out on the link tree. And regardless of if you want to stay connected, help us improve our events for the future, we have a feedback form also on the link tree. And we'd really, really appreciate if you fill that out, give us your comments, if you have any further questions. And yeah, that'll help us for the future. Thank you so much.
And I will say, if you're a teacher who wants to get involved, please also fill out the form and/or email us at thebullhorn215@gmail.com. We would love to help involve teachers in any future actions.
Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone. And if there's anything you missed tonight or last week, both sessions will be in full on this channel right after this. So if you missed anything, or if you have any friends that are interested in learning more, you can refer them here. And more information is posted at the Bullhorn 215 on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you.